Hello everyone, I hope you're doing well. In today's video, Episode 4, we explore how technology began to dominate the battlefield. We'll discuss how soldiers had to adapt to a war where machines, tanks, planes, and heavy artillery were now deciding the fate of millions. When courage failed, leaders turned to machines. And once killing became efficient, human life became cheap. World War I, Machines vs. Men. A world history series by The Perfect Professor. Episode 4. Part 1. When killing became efficient. The war did not become deadlier by accident. It became deadlier by design. When humans were no longer enough. By 1915, leaders understood something clearly. Human courage could not break the stalemate. So they turned to machines. Not to save lives. To end resistance. The promise of technology. Technology was sold as solution. Faster weapons. Stronger firepower. Greater efficiency. Efficiency was the key word. Not mercy. Not restraint. Machine guns ended movement. The machine gun did not invent killing. It perfected it. A few soldiers could stop thousands. Advances collapsed in seconds. The battlefield rewarded stillness. Movement became suicide. Artillery as industrial process. Shelling was no longer tactical. It was systematic. Factories produced death. Railways delivered it. Coordinates decided impact. Killing became logistical. Distance removed responsibility. Machines allowed killing without seeing. No faces. No voices. No hesitation. Distance made violence easier. The human element disappeared. The rise of indirect death. Most soldiers died without knowing who killed them. A shell. A fragment. A collapse. Death arrived anonymously. There was no enemy to hate. Only machinery. Why commanders trusted machines more than men? Machines did not panic. Did not disobey. Did not break psychologically. Machines did what they were told. Even when orders were wrong. Humans became variables. Men were counted, allocated, replaced. Losses were expected, acceptable, necessary. Human life became a resource. The cold logic of efficiency. Efficiency does not ask moral questions. It asks, how fast? How many? At what cost? World War I answered all three brutally. The war changes its language. Language shifted. Men became units. Deaths became losses. Battles became operations. Words softened reality. Machines thrived in abstraction. Professors' reflection, progress without conscience. This was the moment warfare crossed a line. When innovation stopped serving humanity, and humanity began serving systems. The machines did not cause cruelty. They made it scalable. World War I. Machines vs. Men. A world history series by The Perfect Professor. Episode 4, Part 2, Factories of Death. The battlefield was no longer the front line. It was the factory floor. When war moved indoors. By 1916, the most important battles were not fought with rifles. They were fought with schedules. Steel mills. Assembly lines. Railway timetables. Whoever produced more lasted longer. Killing became a supply problem. Shells were counted. Bullets were rationed. Explosions were planned months in advance. War was no longer chaos. It was inventory. Victory depended on output, not courage. Civilians became part of the war. Factories ran day and night. Women replaced men at machines. Children worked longer hours. Cities became extensions of the front. The distinction between soldier and civilian blurred. Everyone was involved. Why peace became inconvenient. Entire economies reorganized around war. Jobs depended on production. Profits depended on contracts. Governments depended on factories staying open. Peace was no longer just a moral choice. It was an economic disruption. The rise of the war economy. Governments controlled prices, directed labor, managed industries. This level of state power was unprecedented. War normalized control. Efficiency justified everything. Distance made guilt abstract. Those who built weapons never saw their effects. They saw numbers, quotas, deadlines. The suffering was elsewhere. This distance made participation easier. Propaganda filled the gap. Posters promised purpose. Sacrifice was framed as duty. Production was framed as patriotism. Moral discomfort was replaced with slogans. Why industry outpaced ethics. Factories evolved faster than conscience. Output increased. Destruction scaled. No one stopped to ask whether they should, only whether they could do more. The war becomes self-sustaining. Once built, the machine demanded feeding. More steel, more labor, more bodies. Stopping meant collapse. So, the system continued. Professor's reflection: when production replaces judgment. World War I showed how modern societies can sustain destruction. Not because people want suffering, but because systems reward continuation. This is how wars outlive their reasons. Episode 4, Part 3, New Weapons, New Nightmares. Every time the war stalled, someone invented a solution. Every solution made it worse. Innovation became escalation. When attacks failed, commanders did not question strategy. They questioned equipment. If rifles failed, build machine guns. If machine guns failed, use artillery. If artillery failed, change the air. The war did not adapt wisely. It escalated blindly. Flamethrowers. Fear as a weapon. Flamethrowers were not efficient. They were psychological. Fire rolled into trenches. Oxygen vanished. Men fled screaming. Survival meant abandoning position. Fear did what bullets could not. This was not warfare. It was terror engineering. Tanks return, still not ready. Tanks reappeared, improved but imperfect. They crushed wire, crossed trenches, then stalled. Mechanical failures were constant. They inspired hope briefly, then disappointment. Technology promised salvation. Reality delivered maintenance problems. Chemical weapons evolve. Gas returned, stronger, faster, more lethal. Masks improved. So did toxins. Each defense inspired a more aggressive attack. The war became an arms race against lungs and nerves. Why every weapon lowered the bar. Each new weapon justified the next. Once gas existed, restraint felt foolish. Once fire existed, mercy felt naive. The idea of too far disappeared. The war normalized extremes. The soldier as test subject. Weapons were tested in combat. Failures were noted. Successes were scaled. Human bodies provided feedback. There were no ethics committees. Only results. The language of necessity. Leaders spoke of necessity, of inevitability, of doing what must be done. These words erased responsibility. If something is necessary, no one is guilty. Why no one pressed pause? Pausing meant vulnerability. Vulnerability meant defeat. So, escalation felt safer than restraint. The war rewarded aggression. Even when it failed. The arms race that had no finish line. Innovation outpaced adaptation. By the time soldiers learned to survive one weapon, another arrived. Learning never caught up. Suffering did. Professor's reflection: when solutions become symptoms. World War I reveals a brutal pattern. When problems are systemic, technological fixes amplify damage. Innovation without reflection turns crisis into catastrophe. Episode 4, Part 4, Commanders, Distance, and the Myth of Control. The farther leaders were from the front, the easier decisions became. War from a table, not a trench. High command lived far from mud. Maps replaced landscapes. Pins replaced people. Arrows replaced lives. The war was reduced to symbols. Reality was filtered out. Why distance changed judgment. Distance removes consequence. A decision made in comfort feels lighter than one made under fire. Commanders did not hear screams. They did not smell decay. They saw reports. And reports never bleed. The illusion of control. From headquarters, the war looked manageable. Timetables were updated. Positions were marked. Losses were calculated. Control felt real. It wasn't. Orders lagged behind reality. By the time an order reached the front, conditions had already changed. Attacks continued after failure. Bombardments continued after objectives shifted. Men died for plans already obsolete. Why retreat was treason? Admitting retreat meant admitting miscalculation. Miscalculation meant blame. So, commanders held ground, even when holding meant slaughter. Stubbornness was reframed as resolve. The culture of optimism. Reports were softened. Failures minimized. Successes exaggerated. Bad news was filtered upward. Leaders believed what they wanted to hear. Reality paid the price. When responsibility became invisible, no single order caused disaster. It was accumulation. Small decisions. Repeated errors. Shared assumptions. When everyone is responsible, no one is accountable. The soldier as an input. Men were assigned to sectors. Sectors were reinforced. Losses were replaced. The individual vanished. The system continued. Why leadership failed quietly. There was no coup. No revolt. Just persistence. Leadership failure was normalized. The war taught people to endure dysfunction. Professor's reflection. Abstraction is dangerous. World War I shows how abstraction protects power. When suffering is converted into data, empathy evaporates. Control becomes an illusion maintained by distance. Episode 4, Part 5, When Humans Became Secondary. At some point, the war stopped asking how many lives it would cost. It asked how many it could afford. Replacement became the strategy. Losses were expected, planned for, calculated. When a unit was destroyed, another replaced it. Names were not remembered. Numbers were. The system did not mourn. It replenished. Training could not keep up. New soldiers arrived faster than they could be prepared. Weeks of training replaced months. Experience became rare. Fear became universal. The front consumed men faster than society could shape them. Why youth became currency. Older soldiers were exhausted. Younger ones were available. So, youth became expendable. Teenagers learned war before adulthood. Some never learned anything else. Empathy slowed the machine. Caring reduced efficiency. Grieving slowed movement. Questioning delayed orders. So, empathy was discouraged. Distance helped. Language helped. Losses sounded cleaner than deaths. The vanishing individual. Soldiers stopped being people. They became reinforcements, reserves, casualties. Identity dissolved. Uniforms replaced faces. Why this logic spread everywhere? Factories did it. Headquarters did it. Governments did it. When systems grow large, they sacrifice individuals for stability. The war magnified this instinct. Resistance felt futile. Refusal meant punishment. Protest meant isolation. Obedience felt safer than resistance. Most people complied, not out of belief, but exhaustion. The cost of treating humans as inputs. Morale eroded. Trust weakened. The gap between leaders and soldiers widened. The war kept functioning, but something inside society fractured. Why this was a turning point? After World War I, nothing felt sacred in war. If millions could be expended, anything could be justified. This logic would return. Stronger. Professor's reflection. Systems remember, people don't. World War I taught institutions how to endure suffering. But it taught humanity something darker. That systems can survive by consuming the people inside them. Episode 4, Part 6, The Legacy of Mechanical War. By the end of the war, the machines were no longer tools. They were the standard. What could not be unlearned? World War I taught nations how to kill efficiently. That knowledge did not disappear. Factories remained. Designs improved. Methods refined. The war ended. The system stayed. Why humanity never took control back. After 1918, people spoke of peace. But they kept the machinery. They kept the logic. They kept the language. They told themselves it was for defense. History heard preparation. The war that rewrote the rules forever. Before World War I, war was seasonal. After it, war was industrial. Before it, armies fought. After it, societies did. The difference was irreversible. How machines changed decision-making. Once killing became efficient, restraint felt dangerous. If the enemy had machines, you needed better ones. Escalation became rational. Fear justified everything. The dehumanization that outlived the trenches. Soldiers returned home. The systems did not. Bureaucracy learned how to replace lives, normalize loss, abstract suffering. These lessons would be reused
soon.
Why this war was a warning. World War I was not just destruction.
It was a prototype
Of total war, of mechanized death, of human serving systems. The future listened. What was truly lost? Not only lives, illusions, the belief that progress guaranteed morality, the belief that intelligence prevented catastrophe, the belief that technology was neutral. Those beliefs died quietly. The silence after the machines. When the guns finally stopped, the silence felt unfamiliar. People had adapted to noise, to production, to loss. Peace felt unstable. Professor's reflection. When tools become masters. World War I revealed a dangerous truth. When systems grow powerful enough, humans stop guiding them. They maintain them. And maintenance is not wisdom. Closing words for Episode 4. The machines did not win the war. They changed what war meant. From this point forward, humans would never fight alone, and they would never be in control again. Before we end, I have a question for you. Do you think technology makes war cleaner, or does it just make it more destructive? I'd love to see your perspective in the comments. That's it for Episode 4. The machines changed the war, but the biggest shift was still to come. In the next episode, we'll see how a superpower finally entered the fight. See you in Episode 5. Take care and see you soon.